there again. Today we continue. Uh, you can ask the questions through your chats or by writing the message. All right. I think everything is okay now. There were three students. One more will join soon, seeing the link. This is YouTube channel, and if you think this is okay and you are comfortable, we will continue. Otherwise, we will meet through Google Meet. Anyhow, uh, you have to learn metaphysical poetry. Today, because of some troubles, the mood is out, but I'll try to give you some ideas about it. Well, this is Elizabethan period. It is a very long period in a way, covering nearly 160 years, beginning from 16th century, 1500, and ending in 6060, or and various political, social, economical, and literary changes came. And because of all this, mostly literature is also influenced. We all know that literature is a mirror of life, the life that is led before the writer. A writer lives in a particular era and he is influenced by it. Hence, for us, it is very necessary to go back into the background of writers. We have to learn particular movement, that is metaphysical poetry. But before that, when a movement comes, there is not one writer, but there are many. It means one writer is not influenced, but there are other writers also. So, group of writers, when they are influenced, when they have certain thinking, when they have some attitude, when they have certain motives, they either declare manifesto or they themselves understand the manifesto. Manifesto means what they want to do for the writing, for the society, for literature. That is how, when we go for metaphysical poetry, we'll have to go back. What is the time and how it got inspiration or the root in the particular work they are doing. Metaphysical poetry, the term, is applied to 17th century poets. We'll talk about them, but today I'll give you the background, Elizabethan literature, especially of poetry. You know only Shakespeare as a poet, but you must have also learned history where some dramatic poets were there, Edmund Spenser and some of other poets. Edmund was a very great poet, major poet, but there were also minor poets. Uh, these poets are known as Elizabethan poets, or you can say uh, in literature, when we talk about Elizabethan literature, we use lyrics, or you can say the first period of romantic poetry. Uh, when we say about romantic poetry, immediately lyrics come in our mind. So Elizabethan period was a great period of lyrics in a way, we can say. And metaphysical poetry is also a form of a lyric. But when we say lyric, it has certain connotations, certain things in mind come. So today we will go to the lyrics, Elizabethan period, because if we know what sort of poetry it was, then it would be better. We will come to know how metaphysical poetry the earlier period, or rather we can say whether they want to be influenced or they are against the influences. uh, Things can be only clear when we know period before them. So Elizabethan poetry, we say it is a sweet period, lyrical period. Uh, Things you know that there were to give rise to lyrical poetry. Especially, it was a peaceful period, Elizabethan period, because before Elizabeth came to reign, there were a lot of upheavals in political fields. Before Elizabeth, her sister Queen, and then her father, some of her years, 3 or 5 years, they were very ambiguous for the people. But then Queen Elizabeth established herself. People also realized that there is no political conflict now, there will be peace. And when there is peace in the society, people would have time to think for their creativity. Moreover, Queen Elizabeth also settled down some of the religious problems. Later on, they grew, and this point also we will keep in mind to understand metaphysical poetry. So, Elizabethan period gives rather time to English church. Now they go to there, and Queen Elizabeth settled some of the rules for the church. I mean, religion is a matter where people always have a deeper faith, and she knew it very well. So politically, there were some rivals to Queen. Some people did not like her coming to the power because of certain attitudes to religion and other things. But people now understood that the Queen is making progress. She is reviving the past of England. She is trying to restore the glory of England, and that is how uh, politically it is set, and then it is socially is also settling down, and then it is a commercial period. People were going out for various purposes. You know, there are various travels, geographical um, places were found out, and English people went there for various exploitations, maybe social, cultural, as well as commercial. Basic purpose was a commercial exploitation, and that is how they went everywhere. This going to various things give power to imagination. How these people were, what sort of land was there, what is the culture, how things were taking place. So dreams, imagination spurred. So Elizabethan period gave imagination, and then prosperity of the country, peace, commercial activities grew. When people are happy, when people have money, when people have food, when people have business, when they have activities, uh, everything to provide them food and shelter, and then when they are safe and sound within the country and from the challenges of outside the country, they would think about literature, and that is what uh, lyrics having these things. I mean, Shakespeare and his contemporaries, they began to give thoughts to poetry. We know that Elizabethan dramas, they are incomplete without poems. Everywhere, songs are there, and people loved them. People liked them. Uh, Without song, nobody could imagine any Elizabethan drama. So it is a part of entertainment people liked, and that is how the writer also began to take interest in poetry, and hence, as a part of a drama, poetry came, and that is how we have lyrics. Now, when we go into the history of Elizabethan lyrics, again we will have go to Europe, especially some of the countries from where English lyrics takes root, and that is Italian sonnets, Greek poetry. Sonnets came. First of all, they were imitations. Later on, improvisations, and then creative poems began to come. So Elizabethan sonnets, they are basic things for poetry revival. And these sonnets, they were very simple, straightforward. Anybody can understand. Uh, there was a quality of ears, I mean audio quality, music you can say. And basically, these poems were devoted to love and nature, and then various aspects of our life. And that is how Elizabethan sonnets. In a way, sonnet means it is a poetry, we can say it is a poem, but basically, sonnets were popular. That's why we say Elizabethan lyrics. Shakespeare started sonnet writing. No doubt before him, Yacht and Surrey wrote and they popularized uh, poem. But much more popularity is given by Shakespeare. But we should not forget Yacht and Surrey, they brought Elizabethan sonnets. And these are known as English sonnets. Because Shakespeare contributed much and his poems became very popular, we can say they are the English sonnets or Shakespearean sonnets. Now, as Shakespeare started, people loved, people liked. There were some qualities which people loved, especially there are the subjective poems, Lady Love, you can say. Shakespeare sonnets you must have learnt, and these are the poems where anybody can try. And later on, a group of poets who followed Shakespeare came, among them Henry Constable, Philip Sidney, and many more poets were there. In short, if we have to analyze Elizabethan poetry, we can say it is romantic because it gives way to imagination, then deep feelings of love, then it was a simple poetry. When I say simple, it means simple to understand the reader. It is not simple for writing. For poets, it is always difficult to write a simple poem, but uh, this is what we find in Elizabethan lyrics. And moreover, you can say these are the subjective poems. It means a poet's feelings for something. Mostly the sonnets of Shakespeare are devoted to Lady Love, but in background we also find various other themes regarding death, nature, all sorts of things. So there is imagination, simplicity in diction, sweetness, then nature, love, all these things are part of Elizabethan poetry. That is romantic revival, or you can say first romantic period in English literature. Now, there were lot of poets everywhere. Sweetness um, prevailed for because it is a trend then, and everybody wished to write in the same manner. So we can say this poetry became very popular, and everybody tried for it. People liked it. So that is how lyrics, Elizabethan lyrics, came. But then period changes. In 1603, Queen Elizabeth passed away, and then again upheavals, chaos. Then King James the First came to power, and things were changed. And look, as the political power changed, other things also changed. Now, King James the First was a different person from the Queen. The power Queen Elizabeth had, that was not with the king. The foresight, the balance, the attitude Queen Elizabeth possessed They were missing in King James I. Most of the time he lived outside of England, so he couldn't understand the people very well. Even he had difficulty in speaking English too. He couldn't understand people, and being a king, he need to know uh, what people want to say, because ultimately communication will set everything. If he is unable to communicate his views, and if he is unable to understand what people say, then there is no way, and that is a great problem. And then he would be guided or misguided by the people who are around him. And he had no decency as the queen had. He had no so much strong hold over the people and courtiers. He himself indulged in low mentality, morality, both. And the grace of court and the courtiers went down. As a result, what happened that earlier during the time of Queen Elizabeth, religious matters were settled down. Nobody had power to challenge the queen, and those things now got loose. The earlier people who were not satisfied with the England and Protestant church, they were the people, Catholic people, Roman Catholic people. Now there was dissatisfaction. This dissatisfaction came out, surged, and uh, these people now started uh, their voice making, and they made their efforts to be heard. Slowly, this trend grew up, and the people who were the followers of English Church, they also found that these Roman Catholic people have mind, thinking, and slowly they began to have sympathy towards Roman Catholic people. They are the Puritan people. So a trend of a Puritan age begins to come here, and people started making revolts against King James first. No doubt, it is somewhat controlled, but dissatisfaction is very much among the people. Look, what I want to say, that this dissatisfaction, this gloomy period, this somewhat dubious mentality, doubts about the king and the country, and then all these things will come into minds of the people. And the people, I mean, the poets who were writing at the earlier uh, will be influenced by this thing. They won't find their output very suitable to the age, and hence uh, they would find it difficult to write. Either they will have to change their outlook for writing, or they will have to make compromise, or you quit. Now these options are very horrible for any creative writer. So slowly, um, that sweetness of the poetry, that loftiness, that greatness of the Elizabethan poetry is slowly coming down. Then King the James I, he himself was a man of pleasure, and even in courts he did not hesitate to do all these things. He promoted some of the sports, etc. But ultimately, there is no so much thinking matters, religious upheavals, commercial, it's okay going on, but upheavals in political matters lost the faith in the king. Nearly two or three plots were made to remove the king, but anyhow, he survived. And later on, look in this King James I, the poetry which we know is a Jacobian period. It means from Elizabethan poetry, now we go to Jacobian poetry. It is very different from earlier trend. In this Jacobian poetry, some of the poets uh, now poets realize that they will have to stand against the time. Either they have to suit or quit. So poets began to suit themselves with the king, and they tried to please, because ultimately poets were supported by the king or lords and those who are the noble people. They would give pension or rewards to the poets. Any poet would be uh, having eyes on his financial condition, so patronage those noble people. So the poets who came into Jacobian period, that is King James's period, that is known as Jacobean poetry, but we know other name as uh, courtier poets or cavalier poets, you can say. And the tendency of cavalier poets is, that they try to please the king, witty poetry, etc. But things have already changed. And then by the time 1630, again there is a change in English monarchy. Uh, Queen Elizabeth, some of the periods, nearly uh, 2 or 3 decades, then 2 decades of King James the First, and then comes the Charles the First. Again, whatever the trend set by King James First is carried on by Charles the First. He himself also had no power over the courtiers, because he himself was morally down, character down, no grace, same troubles as the King James the First had. So during his time, the tendency of Puritan people grew, and it went very high. Now, majority of the English people thought that this is not a good thing. Only Roman Catholic people are good. So there were conflicts about Roman Catholic Church people, followers, and the English Church, or you can say Protestant Church. So, uh, in a way, roots of a civil war, they were already found, or you can say see, came out in King James the First period, and then now this civil war grew up, and there were lot of conflicts against the king, and Charles the First tried to suppress these things in such a period, religiously controversial, politically also not a good one. People are unhappy, and people, as I told you, they will look at the time and then they will think about their creativity. So in this period, moreover, Charles the First was influenced by French bringing up. He passed a lot of time over there. So whatever he found good in Paris, he tried to bring in England. So people now found French influence over England, and that is also another cause for literature to change. There's a lot of French influence came in English literature, especially that comedy, etc. So my purpose is the only poetry. I'm not talking about drama. So Elizabethan poetry or dramatic poets, you can say, then cavalier poets, Jacobean poetry, you can say, and then the poetry that is Puritan poetry. Puritan age is giving so much power. So in these, our roots are in Elizabethan poetry. For metaphysical poetry, I'm talking, and then it grows up in the Jacobean period, and by the time Charles the First passes first decade, that ends. So uh, metaphysics Metaphysical poetry is the link between two periods. We will consider mostly the Jacobian period, initial stage of Elizabethan period, and some of the years in King Charles the First period. So that is nearly, you can say, 30 or around about 3 decades of metaphysical poetry. And hence, it would be influenced by Elizabethan poetry, and Jacobean poetry, Cavalier poets, and then it will have also effect of Puritan poetry. So these are the causes that gives rise to new tendency for poetry, and that is metaphysical poetry. So when I say metaphysical poetry, it is a new trend, it is a new group, it is a new way of looking to poetry. What it is, how did it come into existence? What are the chief characteristics of the metaphysical poetry? We will talk about it tomorrow. Right now, I conclude this session. If you have any question, if you want to ask about this lecture, you personally send me your feedback and message also. Also, let me know whether you are comfortable or not, and also tell me how much should I speak English. If you are comfortable with 100%, there is no problem. And if you wish that I should moderate my work, giving some thinking or explanation in Gujarati, you can also ask me. Feel free. Our purpose is no doubt to learn English, but our purpose is also to learn whatever we have the text in the mind. Once things are clear, you will not have problems. Don't worry. See you tomorrow. Thank you very much.